love seeing what we can get kids to do, if you know what I mean. Like, where else can you tell 1,000 kids to split up and run into each other and they're having fun doing it, do you know what I mean? So it's like...
It is confusing, like I wonder why it's become like a thing, like people do roll desks and run into each other, and I was thinking I couldn't do that.
Artists changing their sound is nothing new when it comes to music. It's actually quite common for the best artists to shift their style between each record to make sure their sound always stays fresh. And from an artist's perspective, it's fair to say that you would probably get pretty bored too if you did the same thing over and over. But it's not very often we see an established artist, let alone an entire band, switch genres deep into their careers in as divisive of a way as today's subjects have. Bring Me the Horizon is infamous for their massive change in sound over the years, leaving metal behind and embracing life as a pop rock group. And yeah, I hear you furiously typing about how experimental and oh, it's so good and it's so different. Ugh. I hear your comments, and yeah, they still have heavy elements in some of their songs, but let's just be honest. Since their album That's the Spirit, pop has been their bread and butter. And there isn't anything wrong with that anyway. It's obviously worked out extremely well for them. But I'm a bitter old fan, so fuck it. I want to talk about the fantastic trilogy of albums that they produced in their prime. I want to talk about how Bring Me the Horizon used to be a metal band.
Hello, we are here with Bring Me the Horizon, guys. How you doing?
Alright, thanks.
Good, thanks. I'm good.
Everybody's good. That's what we like to hear. You good back there? Yay! Brilliant. So, guys, how was yesterday?
Yeah, really good. Pretty fun. That place were really big, and everyone seemed to enjoy it. Apart from this one kid going nuts up front for some reason. But yeah, apart from that, it was really good.
Like nuts in a bad way, not in like a dancey way.
Well, we were just being a dickhead.
Bring Me the Horizon formed all the way back in 2004, when high school friends Oliver Sykes and Matt Nichols met Lee Malia and started making music as teenagers. Not long after, Curtis Ward and Matt Keane would end up joining the band, rounding them out into their original lineup. And if you're wondering where the name came from, well, it actually came from a quote from Pirates of the Caribbean. The band would be the first artist signed to a small label called 30 Days of Night Records and release their first EP, basically speed running the first 5 years of being a band in less than one. But considering it was the band's first EP on a small label that no one's ever heard of, it was actually pretty incredible what they were able to put together. The sound of the EP is that of early deathcore with fast and heavy riffs, high-pitched screams, and solid drumming from Matt Nichols' end. But I haven't even told you the name of the album just yet. It was a little-known EP titled This Is What the Edge of Your Seat Was Made For. The record starts off with the track R.E. They Have No Reflections, a track that if it came out today would probably be considered part of the scrams genre of music. It starts off with some strong and fast panic chords crescendoing into a heavy first verse, giving us a taste of all these gnarly screams. And while the track definitely sounds juvenile by today's standards, I mean, this was some of the heaviest stuff that you could hear from the genre at the time. That being said, the thing that dates it most is the track's complete lack of structure, being a continuous flow of different riffs and parts shifting between each other every minute or so, with no real continuity tying it together. While you could say that was a product of the band being young, it was also the style at the time during the mid-2000s. The second track off the EP is Who Wants Flowers When You're Dead? Nobody. A more straightforward song compared to They Have No Reflections. It continues the fast-paced, chaotic sound that we heard from their previous track, The song itself sounds like it was written with the explicit intent of getting crowds to mosh at shows. And the next two tracks kind of fall in this same wheelhouse, with its next song being Roar. While it's got a really stupid name, the song is actually fantastic and shows off just how heavy the band could be.
Take it back, what you stole from me. Take it back, what you stole from me, baby.
It takes a lot from 90s hardcore and focuses more on creating thick atmosphere and a slow burn sound before barraging you with breakdowns. And honestly, it's a breath of fresh air after the chaotic nature of the first two songs on the EP. The final track, however, is the legendary song Traitors Never Play Hangman. If you were to revisit any of the songs from this EP, then this would be the one. It's the closest to the sound that the band would later embrace on their first record, and it's also the best song on the EP. Though if I had any real critique of this track, it's that it sounds extremely dated by this point. That being said, the band would gain their first bit of traction shortly after releasing this EP, and playing some local shows, getting the attention of Visible Noise Records, who would go on to sign them for a 4-album contract. The label would even release the EP on a much wider scale, as well as fund the band's extensive touring at the time. All this aided in Bring Me the Horizon getting the much needed attention that they were looking for, and bring in some genuine excitement for their first commercial release. – 2005 and 2006 were busy years for the band, mostly spent on the road. And because of this, the music of their debut record was written haphazardly before entering the studio in Birmingham, England. With this, it would prove to be detrimental to the band, and they would later regret their lack of effort and focus with this record, choosing to record almost all their future material in secluded studios far away from civilization.
The last time we recorded, we were in Birmingham in England, just in the city centre, and like this time we were in Sweden in the middle of nowhere, just surrounded by forests and lakes, and there were absolutely nothing around us. So I mean, it just meant we could like focus more on CD and stuff. We didn't get distracted, and yeah, it was good. It helped us a lot.
Because the temptations of bars, broads, and playtime were too much for them at the time. This was also caused by the stress that they were feeling due to all the hype that they had built around them, and their desire to deliver a truly great record. All of this resulted in a messy and at times aimless body of work. Despite this, the band created a great album to debut with, titled Count Your Blessings. And while the album does have some low points, when it hits hard. To see this, we have to look no further than the opening track, Pray for Plagues. This song is pretty infamous, but deservedly so because it's fantastic. The song and its video was perfect for the time, and as a lead single, it boosted Bring Me the Horizon's profile and gained tons of new fans for them. The track shows off a lot of growth in their songwriting ability, and especially in Ollie Sykes' vocal style. The momentum is continued on with the album's next and brilliantly titled track, Tell Slater Not to Wash His Dick, opening with a guitar solo from Lee before crescendoing into another heavy thrash and bash. The track is a fun and intense one. The album continuously ramps up with every song, especially on its third track, Braille, originally titled Through Stevie Wonder's Eyes Only. And to avoid sounding redundant, the track's pretty good. But it is the last great track we hear for a little while, because after Braille, the album kind of just falls apart. The following two songs, a lot like Vegas and Black and Blue, and a later song, Liquor and Love Lost, all just kind of sound boring and generic. They're not bad, but they're just very by the numbers for 2000s metalcore. It all just comes across as the band chasing trends, with them sounding very reminiscent of As Blood Runs Black and I Killed the Prom Queen. And the album has two instrumentals on it as well that feel like filler on what's already a pretty short record, with Slow Dance sounding like an unfinished demo that never had vocals put on it, and the interlude that plays before the finale, 15 Fathoms and Counting, being the album's short reprieve before it all ends. And that's not to say the record is only good for its first three songs. Other tracks on it, like Medusa and Off the Heezy, are both fantastic and bring back the energy and the originality of the opening songs. But for a hyped debut record, it does fall a bit short. Count Your Blessings would ultimately earn the band a bigger foothold in the metalcore and Warped Tour scenes, and despite how negative I might sound talking about the record, it's not a bad one by any means. It's just a mixed bag of phenomenal standout songs like Pray for Plagues and generic mediocre crap like Black and Blue. From here, though, the band would continue their extensive touring and make connections with other prominent bands at the time, like Devil Wears Prada and the previously mentioned I Killed the Prom Queen. But this success was overshadowed by a massive wave of hate that they would soon receive, with many metal fans attacking them for their emo haircuts, tattoos, and criticizing Ollie Sykes' higher-pitched vocals. Overall, they were looked at as posers by the larger metal community. And this went as far as the band having bottles thrown at them during their opening slots for Killswitch Engage. And it's all this negativity, hate, and the dislike of their first album that would heavily influence their second record. After the mixed bag that was Count Your Blessings and its reception, Bring Me the Horizon would approach Suicide Season drastically different, opting to spend a lot more time writing new songs and experimenting with other genres, and in the case of Ollie Sykes, different vocal techniques. Viewing their second record as a make it or break it moment for the band, considering the wave of negativity that they had received and their overall personal dissatisfaction with Count Your Blessings.
According to Kerrang, somebody said that Bring Me the Horizon is overrated and the EP was shit.
I said that.
Oh, you did?
I said that.
And this new approach to music ended up catching the attention of Swedish producer Fredrik Nordstrom, who had previously dismissed them as posers as everyone else did. Now, unlike their first album, the band decided to record in a remote Swedish village in order to cut out any distractions and remove any temptations a city might bring to them. But the recording process wasn't all that changed. The band let go of some of its heavier elements in order to embrace a more metalcore and hardcore punk sound. They started to structure their songs in a more straightforward fashion here, and Ollie Sykes' vocals also took a massive shift, especially in his approach to lyrics. And in the fall of 2008, Bring Me the Horizon would release Suicide Season. The stark contrast in sound and style is evident from track number 1, and what a track to start off with. The Come Down starts off guns blazing with some chopped up drum tracks and a distorted guitar before jumping straight into a fast-paced thrash and bash song with galloping guitars and Ollie's new, more hardcore influenced screams. Lyrically, the song is about drug dependence, though it does kind of embrace it. The title itself is a reference to either a hangover or the come down off narcotics. Just like the living dead, I've got a taste for something. And I don't want it, I just need it, and I can't believe that. I'd rather live than live forever. The second song off the record was the band's biggest song for many years, Chelsea Smile. The song might have been overplayed at the time, but goddamn was it a great song. This was the band's first real embrace of pop, and while the track is heavy, it's structured like a commercial pop song with an infectious hook. I guess now is probably the best time to talk about it. Suicide Season is covered head to toe in hooks, with almost every track taking on different influences of heavy genres. Songs like The Come Down, Sleep With When I Open, and Football Season Is Over keep up the band's heavier deathcore sound, while tracks like It Was Written in Blood and The Sadness Will Never End are more approached like post-hardcore songs. The album also has a handful of standout songs, one of my favorites being Sleep With When I Open. The first time I heard this song, I was a freshman in high school, and it was one of the heaviest songs I'd ever heard at that point, and also the first time I'd ever heard drop G tuning. With the band playing some of their most brutal material yet, and Ollie singing about taking revenge on a backstabbing ex-friend. A song that I know I'll be crucified for not talking about is Diamonds Aren't Forever. A track infamous for being a crowd destroyer at shows, this song was another one of the band's super poppy takes on metalcore, though they would use it as a bit of a bait and switch because at shows it was the song they would always choose to create massive walls of death to. Other standout songs on the record would be The Sadness Never Ends, a track that features Architect's lead vocalist years before that band would become legendary, and then the album's final song, Suicide Season. The self-titled track on the album is its closer, ending the album on a very grim note. The song is one of the best lyrically, where Ollie sings about a friend who passed away, and the reason the album was even titled and themed the way that it was. Death is only a chapter, so let's rip out the pages of yesterday. Death is only a horizon, and I'm ready for the sun. I'm ready for the sun to set. The album would prove extremely successful, so much so that the band would put out a remix version of the record, taking advantage of the at the time growing EDM scene, even getting a remix from the young and at the time undiscovered Skrillex. And something I do need to mention here is that everything the band was doing at the time was extremely big and successful, and brought in a lot of new fans, from Suicide Season's absolutely amazing artwork to the more interesting and poppy sound. The band's more commercial scene kid look was also a huge go-getter, and their entertaining videos also did a lot of work in the early days of YouTube. Unlike Count Your Blessings, the band would suffer far less hate outside of the metal circles that already didn't like them, though there was one big issue that they fell into: the collapse of their relationship with their bandmate Curtis Ward, who had been underperforming at live shows and beginning to distance himself from the band. After a few months of tensions building, he was ultimately fired, and guitarist Jonah Winehoffen from I Killed the Prom Queen would join the band, taking his place. Now, this is the record and era I'm most passionate about and excited to talk about, because this was the band at their apex, and to this day, they've never topped the masterpiece of a record that they made. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. Bring Me the Horizon exited the Suicide Season era with smashing success, getting a massive and dedicated fan base, solidifying themselves as a mainstay of the scene, and successfully bridging themselves into other musical territories. While they lost a founding member, the band gained a talented guitarist and songwriter. Though there was a negative side to things, and that was the fact that the band was struggling with the temptations and turbulence of being a touring act and all that comes with it. Ollie Sykes in particular had developed some drug issues and a dependence on alcohol and sex.
It just got to the point where I didn't want to be me anymore. I didn't want to have to think about what being Ollie Sykes. People say my name and it made me cringe, so ketamine was obviously the drug I chose because it just disconnected my mind from my body. You take that drug and your name doesn't mean objects don't mean money doesn't mean nothing, the embarrassment's gone because your ego's just disappeared. And that's what I needed to figure out rather than going, you know what, just don't take it.
And while this video is by no means a dissection of Oliver and his many struggles over the years, it is important to bring up because it would play into the lyrical themes and his overall approach to music going forward. Something else to bring up are the rumors of Ollie's damaged vocal cords. While in recent years he's been open about rupturing his vocal cords and canceling shows due to it, as early as 2008, online rumors began circulating that Ollie's change in approach to screaming and his less than consistent live performances were due to damage and injuries that he had inflicted on his voice from screaming incorrectly. And while these are still unconfirmed, I do wholeheartedly think that this is true. Screaming incorrectly can do a massive amount of damage to your voice. Now, mix in drug and alcohol abuse and the strain of constantly touring, and you're basically guaranteed to cause yourself some damage. Now that we got that out of the way though, let's take a look at the record and see what it's all about. When the band began writing the album, Jonah and Lee approached songwriting with a much heavier focus and influence on post-rock, indie, and electronic music. After writing the record in rural Scotland, Bring Me the Horizon would opt to return to the Swedish countryside to record with Fredrik Nordstrom, as well as bring along Skrillex, who would help the band with all their electronic production. And on October 4th, 2010, they would release their third full-length record, There Is a Hell, Believe Me I've Seen It. There Is a Heaven, Let's Keep It a Secret. Kicking off with the song Crucify Me, a heavy and intense track taking more than a little bit of influence from progressive metal, the song shows just how serious the band wanted to be this time around with the most mature and well-written songs of their career. And lyrics that cut deeper than anything that came before or since.
There is a world inside of me, lost in the abyss, drowned in the deep. No set of lungs could salvage me. Only a shipwreck, only a ghost, merely a graveyard of your former self. We just watched the waves crash over, and I've been cast astray.
The song is about Ollie's ketamine addiction, and his pain and urgency are thick and viscous in both the lyrics and his performance. Another track that continues the deeper themes of the album is the track It Never Ends, another one of the band's biggest songs from their metal era, and it deserves all the praise that it's gotten over the years. The song takes a bit of influence from hardcore punk and continues the dark lyricisms of Crucify Me, with Ollie singing about toxic relationships that he engages in to keep up his indulgent and decadent lifestyle, lamenting how it's killing him and that the cycle never ends.
One more nail in the coffin, one more foot in the grave. One more time I'm on my knees as I try to walk away. How has it come to this?
This was the album's lead single, and it encapsulates everything that makes the album great, with a more experimental sound, mature songwriting, and lyrics that might be dark but hold a lot of heart and power behind them, this is the album's greatest strength at play, and what keeps it fresh even to this day, 12 years after the fact. This album is full of amazing songs, like the technical and intense metalcore track Alligator Blood, where Jonah shows off his riff writing abilities, the technical and heavy hook, carried by Ollie's best screams off the record. But if you want to talk about heavy, we have to bring up the bitter and vicious track Blacklist, a song where Ollie rips apart the band's previous guitar player Curtis Ward and the betrayal he felt from his departure and mistreatment of the band.
So just like that, you're fucking dead and gone. You can only wear a crown of thorns for so long. We build an empire when you took the throne, but you build it from bayonets after.
You won't miss the water till the river runs dry. You won't miss the sunset till it burns out the sky. You won't miss what you have till it's finally lost. But you don't miss a bastard when you're bearing his cross.
To this day, these are still some of my favorite lyrics. Where many songs about previous members end up corny and toothless, Blacklist is still intense and cutting. The last track I'll gush about off this record is the second to last track, Blessed with a Curse. One of the more experimental and meaningful songs off the record. The lyrics see Ollie Sykes talking about his inability to be a good partner to his lovers, lying, cheating, and being out for himself. But instead of wallowing in self-pity, he laments his wrongdoings and admits that he has a problem. And with great musical compositions, arrangements, and it's just amazing lyrics, it makes the song timeless.
Everything I've done turns to stone, turns to stone.
There Is a Hell is one of the best metal records ever written, and I can care less about what some elitists have to say about that statement. The album features more standout moments than what I brought up. I didn't even talk about the all-star cast of guests who pop up, such as Lights, Josh Franceschi, or even Josh Scogin of The Chariot. This album would go on to perform extremely well, with the band embarking on massive tours and receiving critical acclaim. And while I said this video would focus on a trilogy of records, well, it's time to address the elephant in the room.
Forgot what I'm on about.
Sempiternal is an album that is remembered fondly and was received very warmly by fans and critics upon release. But for me and many other longtime fans, this was our jumping off point. And while most people will point to their later albums, That's the Spirit and Amo as their embrace and later solidification as a pop-focused group, I would argue that this already happened on 2013's. This album came after a break from touring and the longest wait between any Bring Me the Horizon release at that point. And briefly before the release, they would lose guitarist Jonah Weinhoffen due to personal differences, as well as introduce Jordan Fish to the band, someone who would play a key role in the band's songwriting from this point on and influence their shift toward pop. Everything about Sempiternal feels like a deliberate step away from the heavy and intense metal the band was famous for. Many of the songs contained more conventional and generic song structures, lyrics that focused on being anthemic, sing-songy choruses, and an over-reliance on gang vocals and clean singing, and a lot more slow-paced soft songs in the mix as well. And while it might have had some heavier songs here and there, the record was a massive shift, and this was evident in its success. Many of the band's longtime fans had started to abandon ship, and a new wave of online hate started to circulate around them, all while newer fans started to pour in, being much younger and more mainstream-minded people. And while I could go on a rant and talk about how much I don't like Sempiternal, I know it has its fans, and the simple fact is that this album wasn't made for me. It's obvious that they were no longer passionate or happy with the sound and legacy that they had built, and this record was their way of easing away from it and setting the foundations of what they would later evolve into. And from here, the band would continue to shift and change into what they are now, and their time as a metal band had come to an end. Despite their evolution and changes over the years, Bring Me the Horizon's metal records are still beloved by many, and the albums that they made have gone on to become legendary and deeply influence the metalcore scene over the years. To attack them for embracing pop is stupid because we all know metalcore isn't a scene where bands typically have long, prosperous careers, and Bring Me the Horizon has seen the most success and acclaim now than they ever did in the past. That being said, this has been a fun trip through memory lane, and I hope to anyone who hasn't taken the plunge that this has gotten you interested in taking a look at some of this old stuff. But with that, subscribe, support me on Patreon, follow me on Twitter. I'll see you in the next video.
It's me, Madison Ray, playing up your pathetic little band pitties.